we're going to be making a model of the Tesla Model 3 rim. We're going to try to make something similar to this, which is a model that I made before this. So the first step is going to be to open up your browser and go to this link and then click download full resolution. Just be aware of where it's saving it, because we're going to need to know where it's saving it. Mine's saving it in my downloads right now. And then click this X. And then you want to go to this link and do the same thing. Click download, full resolution. You always want to download the full resolution so that you have the maximum detail to work with. So just always click full resolution whenever you're downloading. Then we can click this X and we can close our browser. And then you want to locate the images that you downloaded. Mine's in my downloads folder right here. I'm just going to click and drag to select both of them and drag them onto my desktop for a second. Then I'm going to close this and navigate to a folder where I want to save these as well as my Blender file. So I usually save mine in my Blender stuff, cars, and for this one I'm going to save it in my rims folder and the Tesla 3 tutorial folder. You can just make a new folder by right clicking and making a new folder. I'm sure you guys know how to do that. So we're going to just go into this folder and we're going to drag these two images in there. And I'm going to change this so I can see the pictures better. This changes like the layout. We're also going to save our Blender file here. So that's it for now. We're going to go back into Blender and just open up a new file like this. We're going to press A twice to select everything and press delete and confirm that you want to delete by left clicking. We're going to click on this plus sign, and first actually what we want to do, we're going to save our file first. So we're going to go to File, Save As, and then you want to navigate to where you want to save it. So for me it's the Tesla Model 3 tutorial folder. And then I'm going to give it today's date. And name this Tesla Model 3 rim tutorial. And just click the save button. So now that's saved. You want to click on this plus sign and go to background images, left click here to put a check mark there, and then left click on this little triangle and click add image. You can actually click add image twice because we're going to be adding two images, so I just clicked it twice. Now we want to click open and choose one of them. I'm going to do the prototype one first and do open image. You'll notice it doesn't open the image, so that it opens it we're going to press, or it doesn't display it. To get it to display it we're going to press 3 on the number pad and then 5 on the number pad, and now you can see our picture. You can zoom in with the mouse wheel to get a better look at this. And the other one we want is to just open this other one, so Model 3 wheel, click open. So you see they're both displaying now. We don't want to see them both at the same time, so we're just going to click this little eye on the bottom one to get rid of it, and you can always click the eye again to bring it back. So this bottom one doesn't display the whole rim, as you can see, so we're just going to be using this more for the details, like this inner curve, as well as we're going to use this center part as a texture for later. So we're just going to enable this top one and disable the bottom one. And when you're making a car rim, whatever you're using for a picture for your reference, you always want to have the center of the blender world and the center of the rim as closely matched up as possible, because in basically all cases these spokes here are just duplicates of each other. So this one is going to be exactly the same as this one, and it makes it a lot easier to rotate them around correctly if you have this centered with the center of this. So we're going to have to move our image to make that happen. So we're going to just left click and drag on this. You can also left click and drag while holding shift to move slower. And then do the same with this one to move it up some. You just want to try to position it as close as possible to the center. You're not going to get it perfect because basically every image you use is not going to be 100% a direct shot on the rim. So you're just going to have to get it close and then kind of work with the picture from there. So something like this is going to be okay. It's not perfect, but you're not going to get it perfect. So now we want to add in a plane to start modeling this. So we're going to go to create and choose plane. We're going to press tab and then R, Y, 90 to rotate it 90 degrees. And then press enter. Press S to scale this down. And Z for wireframe so that we can see through it. So when you're creating rims or really any other object, you always want to look for the lines that are following each other, and I'll give you a good example with the other picture. So if we go and take a look at our other picture here, the lines are a lot more prominent. That's why I'm using this picture. So like you have this line that goes here, this crease line, and you'll notice it actually curves and forms this part of the rim. So this is like a key part that you want to start with, because you want to have this curve here all connected geometry. So this and this part need to be all one edge loop basically. So we just want to keep that in mind as we're doing this. So it would be, it actually would be, because this is the area where this is like flatter, and I think in this other picture they were taking it on a different side of the car. So like the flatter area might have been over here, maybe not. I'm not sure. All I remember is that when I made this other one, the flatter area was, well, maybe it actually, no, it was over here I thought, but that's okay. We'll just go with what we have, I guess. So either way, this line needs to be all connected right here. So we're going to take these 2 points, just select one, shift select the other, and bring them out. And you can move them one at a time. We're just going to move them one at a time. And we're going to bring them sort of to the end. Like, it's hard to see here, but this actually curves outward on both ends. This is really common for rims, like at the end, to have a little curve here at the end. So we're going to bring it just before that curve and just before that curve. So on both sides, that's where you want to put those. And we can actually just put these maybe down here somewhere. And we can start adding in some edge loops to curve this better with Ctrl R. Just add in one loop cut, left click, right click. To keep things lower poly, like one strategy you can use is to just start with basically the furthest part and then the furthest part, and then add in geometry very slowly and see how few vertices you can get away with. Like we could have added 3 loop cuts, but you can see this is actually pretty straight, so we don't really need a loop cut here. And it's a lot easier to see that sometimes when you add in detail very slowly. But we do need more here, so we can do Ctrl R, left click, right click, and bring this over. And perhaps we could even get away with not having one here. But I think this will be fine. And to maybe add a little more curvature, we can add another loop cut here. But that, I guess, is optional. So we want this to go down and continue like this. So we're going to bring this all the way down. Select both and do E to extrude, bring this all the way down. Do Ctrl R to add in this curve here. And we want this. It looks like this one's going to continue on like that. I'm going to take a look. I guess we could, yeah, we could just continue this over because you have like this darker shading here. So we're going to continue this over, and we're going to continue this over, possibly. So we're going to use this to continue along this line, and we're going to use this to continue along this line. However, that's okay, I guess. We'll just... This will be a little different than the other one, because the reference I'm using is a little different, but that's fine. So we're going to select these three, just select one, hold shift, select the others, and E to extrude. And this other model is going to be, you can download it, so if you like the other one when we're done, that's totally fine. You can download the other one. This is kind of just to teach you the process, and like your models are not going to be the same every single time, so maybe this one will turn out a little better, maybe not. But so what I'm doing again is we have this furthest point here, we're going to go to the furthest point again. So this one, this bottom one, needs to follow along this line, so we follow along this line, go to the end. This other one's currently in the middle of these two lines, so we're just going to place it in the middle. And then this one's going to be at the end of this line. So something like that, it's going to be fine. And now we want to start adding our curvature. So we're going to do Ctrl R, left click, right click, and just start positioning these. You can move them by themselves, or you can move them together if you want, whatever you feel is appropriate. This could probably use a little more curvature here, so we're going to do another loop cut. And we're actually going to try to position this loop cut. So I just right click to cancel it for a second to explain this. We want to position the loop cut because you can see this piece here comes down like this, and it actually meets up with the side of this spoke here. So we want to position this loop cut so that we can match up this geometry here, or line it up with where this meets up, is what I'm trying to say. So we're going to do Ctrl R, we're going to left click, but we're going to slide it down until it will meet up with this piece here where it will be joining together. And then we're just going to curve this a little, and we're going to make sure this is following along here as well. So since these are kind of following along where this lighter shading is, where this crease would be, we could reposition these over more to line up better with where this shading, the direction of this shading is going, if we want to. That's an option. And then just reposition these as well. It makes this curve a little less curved, but we could always add in another loop cut here with Ctrl R and then just curve this a little better. It's going to be a little higher poly perhaps than my last one by doing that, but that seems to be a reasonable solution this time. So now we want to create this part here, I guess. And I'm not really sure it's going to show it very well here, or perhaps it is. So okay, you can see this part here. It connects with this piece like I said, but it doesn't connect at the top where this crease is. It's a little bit below that, so it's going to have to be moved. For us it'll be moved in the X direction, but it's going to have to be moved away from this other part because it curves downward here and connects like this in a triangle. And you can see it from the other angles as well. Just take a look at that. That's the effect we're trying to create. So we want to go back to our, oh, we're already on this one. We want to go back to the other picture. So this vertex and this vertex, we can actually, I'm just taking another look. It's always good to just keep looking at your reference to make sure you're doing what you want to do. So like this vertex, when it's extruded, needs to be moved down, and this other vertex would need to be moved down a little more, and then that's where it starts to like really join in together. So we could possibly take these two vertices, so select both of them, E to extrude, right click to cancel. We don't want to move it down in this direction, like we want to move it back. Like we want to move it back like this. So that when you're looking at it, you have that depth down there like we saw in that picture. So just bring the picture back to remind you. Like you want to have that depth right here, and it's more distance here at the very end and then less distance until it eventually connects up. So we want more distance on this point, so you want to move it further on the X direction, and then less distance here, and then eventually it's going to join up with this one, which we could probably just do now. It'll be a triangle, that's okay. Just select these three and press F, and you'll have that. And right now, while I'm thinking of it, we're just going to go to Tools and turn on Smooth Shading, so that we have smooth shading here. I just keep hitting number pad 3 to go back to side view, by the way. You can see the hotkeys here, so I'm not explaining like every little thing that I do, but so now that we have that, we want this point that we just moved over on the X direction to continue out like this. So this point here is the one that needs to continue along this line. So we can press E to extrude and bring it over here so that it can match up with this geometry. And then you can press E to extrude again and bring it over here to match it up with this geometry. And then we can fill in these gaps by selecting these vertices, pressing F, selecting these two, and we can just press F, and it's automatically going to be able to figure out where we want those points for us. So we have something like that. You can see like this curve's not the best. You have sort of this jagged edge here, so you could go in and add in some more loop cuts. Like you could do Ctrl R, but since this is a triangle, it's not going to let you do that. What you could actually do is select these two these two here, just make sure you're selecting the one that's at the bottom and do subdivide. So now we have this point. Go back to side view with 3, press G to move it, and just move it over so you have a better curve. So now it's not so bad. You could go back and add in another loop cut here if you wanted to further make that curve a bit better, but that's up to you, I guess. Or you could just adjust the position until the curve looks not so bad. This point probably would be best with a loop cut there, so you could always just add in a loop cut with Ctrl R and then select this one, shift select this one, and then Alt M at last, just so it has better geometry there, because we're going to be moving these points back. Okay, so I guess you can't really see it on this one so well, but I think it's fairly clear. Like this part would be closer to you or closer to the camera, and then this thin part, whatever you want to call it, would be pulled closer to the car. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to take this part that we just created. The only one we're not going to move, like we already positioned this one basically where it needs to be as far as we know. So we want to move these back, these 3 back, but we don't want to move that one back. And what we want to do is between this last point and this point, we want to try to make it a fairly straight line. So we're going to move these two so that it's still curved, but it's more straight like this. And now you can see we're getting that blade effect that we want. So it's looking like a nice blade, similar to how this looks right here. So we have the outside done. We're going to do a little work on the inside. I think, or actually, let's possibly make this blade first. So we're going to continue these points down. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do in this area, because I know like last time I had two edge loops going like this. So we're just going to take these for now, press E to extrude, right click to cancel and bring these over. And we're just going to position them individually, basically where they would need to be. Although it's hard to see on this one too, this one kind of does have a curve out like this. You could create that. It didn't really show up so much in my last model because that part of the this blade was actually hiding inside this outer part that I created. But for realism, you could add that in. I'm probably not going to do it on this one. Well, I might, but we'll see. So we're just going to do possibly something like this. And then we want this one to continue down here. So we're going to E to extrude, bring this down here. Still really not sure how I'm going to do this part, but that's okay. So we're going to do Ctrl R and add in a loop cut here to match up with this. So we're going to do Ctrl R, left click, right click, and then select these and press F so that we have some more geometry there. So we want to look at this blade and see how it's moved on the x-axis. So again, you have like this part would be closer to you, similar to how this part would be closer to the camera. And then this part down here is moved further away. We're just going to assume. You can also look at this this part here and kind of guess. Like you can see that this matches up kind of where this gray area is, and then this kind of matches up maybe a little above the gray area. So you can look at that and kind of, yeah, you can see how this is kind of above that little gray area and this one's kind of a little bit further back. So you can assume that this one's probably a little further back than where this one should be. So we're just going to select these, select all of them, and first we're just going to snap it to this point. So we're going to go down here, change this from increment to vertex, grab it on the x-axis, hold control and snap it to this point. And we may even want to move this back some more, but we'll see. So since these points are supposed to be a little bit closer than this point, we're just going to move it a little bit closer. Not too much, because I don't think it's that much closer to us. But now we have this sort of effect right here, which looks okay. But we may have to move these points down here, because this point I think would be further away from the camera, and then as you get here it gets closer. So it's going to be similar to how we did it before, where we want this point that's closer to be more like this, and then you just want to try to continue that curve something like that, but that's not really the best. Just want to try to keep a fairly straight or a fairly good curve between these. This isn't really the best curvature here, but I think you sort of get the idea, where there's more distance here, less distance here, and then the points in between sort of match the curvature like that. So that doesn't look terrible. It looks okay, I guess. We're just going to save this real quick. Go to File, Save. So we have that inner point, and we can make, or that inner curve, we can make this other curve here. Just looking at the reference. So, okay. Oh, that's the wrong part. Alright, so with rims, a lot of times you'll have like this. Okay, so you have this outer circle area for the rim, and then it goes in and it goes out a bit, or towards the center of the rim a bit, the curvature, and then it goes down and then it comes back out a little, possibly. So it kind of looks like. That's pretty common. So like this area here would be pulled in more than this area here, as you can see. So like this area here is pulled in more than right here. So we're going to select these, press E to extrude, right click to cancel. We're actually just going to press G and move them over. And we're just going to move this in a bit to match up down here, and move this over to where it should be. And then position these as well according to the reference. So this part again is going to need to be pulled in to match up with this. So we're going to take these four, we're going to pull them in, and we're just going to snap it possibly to this one. So just hold control and snap it to that one. So now you've got this sort of effect right here. And you can see on this blade part, okay, so since these are all rotated around, like this blade's going to be the same as this blade, it's going to be the same as this blade, but they each give you a bit of a different angle. Like you can't see the interior part of this blade right here, but over here you can. Like you can see that it doesn't just stop here, it actually gets extruded and inward one more time. So the fact that these are a little off like this is okay, because what we're going to do is take these, E to extrude, right click to cancel, and then snap them back here. And we're going to add an edge loop here, so we're just going to do Ctrl R, add an edge loop, left click, I'm going to drag it down a little to try to match the geometry here. And then we can make a face here by selecting these four and pressing F. So that gives us more like that. So you've got your rim shape now. So the only thing to fill in would be this other part. But actually what I want to do, it's usually a good idea not to leave these like perfectly lined up. Like you can see that they're perfectly on top of each other, and it's usually not a good idea to do that. So you just want to like bring it in a little on the y-axis possibly, and maybe this one too. Just bring it over a little, just to give it a little more shape, give it a little bit more character, whatever you want to call it. This shading just doesn't really look the best, but that's okay, I guess, for now. So to fill in this area, it's going to be tricky. So I'm just going to save this real quick, just because I don't want to mess anything up. So maybe we'll just do Ctrl R, add in a loop cut here, bring this over, and we're actually just going to reposition these to better line up with the direction of this right here. I'm going to bring this over and do the same so that we have this line here. We're going to change some of the geometry to better match up with this. So this needs to go down like this. So we're going to extrude this with E. This needs to go down towards the center here, and we're going to select these faces, press delete, choose faces. And I think possibly we're just going to select these two, Alt M at last, select these two, Alt M at last, and that'll give us that. And we can even just take this one, Shift select this one, Alt M at last, and do the same here. So we're changing the geometry right now is what we're doing. And we're just going to connect these back again. I hope I selected the right one. Yes, I did. Just make sure you get this one here, not the bottom one. Press F. And then we could just do this, like press F here and then continue, do Control R, add in a loop cut here, left click, right click, and fill in these quads right here by pressing F, and we'll see how that looks. It looks a little different. I'm not sure that's what we're looking for, but I guess that's gonna have to do. We're not looking to make a perfect rim. We're just looking to make something decent. What we could do is try to like move some of these points. Like I think part of the problem is that this one needs to be moved up a little, and this one maybe needs to be moved over a little. I just want to see how I did it on this one. I think this other curve actually needs to come down some, so like these here need to go in this direction some. I think that's how I did it the other time. That actually looks a lot better, I think. It gives this nice crease effect here. So that's good for that. And another thing I want to do again is like these points are on top of each other. So I want to take these three here, and just from side view with number pad 3, just press G and move them over slightly, just so that they're not perfectly on top of each other. Still, the shading is not really great, but I'm just trying to see how we could possibly fix that. But if you do Control R and add a loop cut here, it changes the shading a little, but it's not the best. Whatever I did in my first model was a lot better, even though there's still some issues there. but I usually make better models when I'm not recording anyway, because I don't have to think about what I'm saying. I can just kind of do the process. So now we have this rim. The only thing we really need is some more depth on this side of the rim right here to match up with the depth on this side of the rim. Like you can see right here, you'd need more depth down here to match up. So we're going to take these outside vertices, this one too I guess, press E to extrude, right click to cancel, and we're just going to bring these back. Again, we can snap to one of these vertices to give that more depth. Looks like it should be a bit further back though, maybe a little bit further back based on like what I saw right here. And we can take these here, E to extrude, right click to cancel, and move these back as well, and then snap them to these newly created points that we have, something like this. And then we can do Ctrl R, add in a loop cut here, and put it maybe here to line up with this one. And we can select these four, press F to make a face, select these two, press F to make a face, and you've got something like that, which still I guess looks okay. Not the best from this angle. Maybe I'll bring this one back some, bring this one back some, or down some on the Z-axis. That looks pretty good, so we're going to save it. So this is like the basic shape of your spoke here. You could go in and add in that little curvature here. I did that last time, but it looks a little messy, and when I added it over here, at least on the bottom, it went through the rim, so it didn't really show up at all. So maybe we'll just skip that. All you would do is do like another extrusion. You would take these points and do another extrusion by pressing E, and just bring them out like this to get the curvature, and then just continue this down here by pressing E, you know, something like that, and fill this in with F, and you'd have something like this. But you actually have to move these on the x-axis and snap them to this point. This is kind of an optional thing. Like, I'm not really sure this is the best, so I'm actually just going to undo it. This is kind of the process that I went through. It was actually a bit different, but that's a similar way to do it to how I made that curvature there. If you want it, we're going to try it without the curvature, because I always like to try things differently when I'm making a model for a second time. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to make this a little different. But again, we have these points that are kind of on top of each other. So we're going to take these points that we just made and just bring them out slightly, just to add a little curvature. And these points, we're going to bring them down slightly, just to get a little more shape to this. And you can do the same to these inner ones. You can do Alt right click and then deselect the ones you don't want, and just add some small movement, just like we did, and then you get something like that. Although I'm not sure I like this better than, I'm going to try undoing it and see what the difference was. Actually, I don't think it makes much of a difference. So we're just going to, Control Shift Z is to redo, by the way. So I undid and then redid what I did. If that makes sense. So we have the spoke. This is really all we need for this thing. So what we're going to do Now that the spoke is complete, or it's as complete as we're going to make it for now, we're going to do A twice to select everything. And what we want to do is rotate around the center of the model and the center of this rim. That's why it's important to center the picture with the center of the world. It makes this a lot easier. So we're just going to click here and change this from medium point, which is default, to 3D cursor, which is this red and white circle. If your cursor is not in the center, do Shift S and then do cursor to center. That'll put this cursor back here. So if you left click over here and it moves your cursor, do Shift S, cursor to center. Now it's back in the center. And now what we want to do is do Shift D, R, type in 72 on the number pad, and then press enter. And that duplicated and then rotated 72 degrees. And make sure you're in right view when you do this, so press 3 on your number pad so that it will rotate correctly. But it duplicated and then rotated 72 degrees, which is the correct value for a 5-spoke rim. And then you're going to do Shift R to repeat the last action, so it's going to duplicate it again and automatically rotate 72 degrees. And then you can do Shift R 2 more times and you've got your full rim. So the reason it was 72 degrees was you want to do 360, which is the total amount of degrees around a circle, of course, divided by 5, I believe, since we have 5 rims. And I think that's 72. Let me just I feel silly doing this. I usually just do this without thinking. It's different like when you're saying what you're doing versus when you're just doing what you normally do. So it's 360 divided by 5. There you go. So there's the proof. So it's always 360 divided by the number of spokes. So 360 divided by 5 tells you how many degrees you need to rotate your spoke to get the total number of spokes that you need. So if we had like 7 spokes for some random reason, you would do 360 divided by 7. And you'll notice it's not always a perfectly whole number. Like 72 is like a whole number with no decimal. If you ever encounter this, you just want to right click and copy it. And then what you would do, just to show you what you would do, is you would do Shift D, R, and then Control V to paste. And you'll see down on the left, it's got the down on the left, it's got the rotation value just as we want it. And then you would hit enter. So the only difference is you're going to paste that value because it's really hard to remember and you don't want to type it in. And then you would do your Shift R just as we did before, but I'm going to Control Z that because this actually is not what we want to do, because this is a 5-spoke rim, so we've got this correct. I was just showing you what to do if you have like a different value, a different number of spokes. So that's it really for the spoke part. This looks pretty decent. So what we want to do is make this outer part here. So we're just going to go to create in edit mode and we're going to make a circle. You can adjust the number of vertices if you want. I just left it at 32 when I made this the first time and it looked okay. So now we're just going to press R, Y, and then 90 to rotate 90 degrees around the Y axis. S to scale it down. And you just want to try to match the scale to what it looks like in the picture. And we can actually turn this off. We can change this from the 3D cursor to the median point again before I forget. So this outer area is a little bit further out from the rim. So you want this all to be a little bit further out from the rim. And then we're gonna move this a little bit further maybe. And then we're gonna do E to extrude, right click to cancel, S to scale it down a small amount again. And you'll notice that there's this dark color here. It means the normals are flipped. So we're gonna do select linked, and then do mesh normals, flip normals to get the correct normals. And in object mode, we're going to go to tools and do smooth shading to make sure that this newly created part has smooth shading as well. We're going to do alt right click here, E to extrude, right click to cancel, and scale this down similar to how this inner part would be scaled down. So maybe like this. To be honest, this reference image is not the best for doing this. I used a different one to make this other one, but this one's gonna have to do because this is the only one that has a usable license for a video. So we're gonna have to just go with what we got, I guess. So something like this will be okay maybe. And then we're gonna bring it back on the x-axis to be like this, so you can see how our rim is starting to look. And then normally with rims you'll have another edge loop here, so you can do Ctrl R, add another edge loop, and this one would be pulled more back to where it was, so more like this. So you have a shape like this that's closer to what the rim would be like in the real world. So you can go ahead and save this. Now the only thing that's left really is to make the center part. This center part is like you can see they get these bolts here, but in reality this is kind of, let me just do this for a second. This is more what it looks like, where it's got this cover. This is like the cover to the bolts. So you get the bolts underneath, and then you have this cover over it, which is black, and it's got this logo in the center. So like you would take this cover off, obviously, to get to the bolts. The request I had was to make it more like this than to make it with the bolts. So we're going to make it more like this instead. And to do that, we can actually make this as a separate object, because I ended up making it as a separate object in the end anyway. So in object mode, we're going to do create circle. This time we want to use 16 vertices. Like a lot of times a bigger circle, the bigger your circle is, the more vertices you're going to need to make it look like a circle. The smaller the circle, the less vertices you need, so this one we use 32. And in this case 16 usually works pretty good, or at least it did last time. So we're going to press tab to go to edit mode, RY90, press enter, S to scale this down approximately to the size that you want it, so something like that I guess is good. And we obviously don't have a picture of this black part, but if we take a look at what I did, like there's this bevel on this edge here, and then it goes back, and the center of it is pushed out some, so that's what we want to create. So we're going to press E to extrude, right click to cancel, bring this back. That'll give us the initial backward part, and we're actually going to do select linked, and it'll bring this whole thing back like that, so that it's hiding behind the rim. Sort of like that. That'll be okay. And we also want to go to Tools and Smooth Shading. Then back in Edit mode by pressing Tab. You want to Alt-right click on this to get this edge loop right here. And I just did Mesh, Faces, Grid Fill. That'll give you this grid here. And what I also did was go to File, User Preferences, left click on the search box, type in loop, and then left click here. You're gonna have to left click twice, and that will put a check mark here and enable loop tools. Then you can close this window and press 3 to go to side view. And the reason I did that is I want to make this into a better circle. I want to make this inner part into a better circle. So you're going to go to Face Select and select these 4. Go to Vertex Select and then Shift click to deselect the middle vertex. So you should have these 6 outer vertices selected. You want to press W, Loop Tools, Circle. This will create a circle out of your selection, or it will do its best to try to make a circle. In this case, it makes a perfect circle just because of the way it was set up. So we're going to press S to scale this down some, and we want this to be relatively the size of this hole. So maybe something like that. So we have this. And now we want to shift select this middle one to get the selection back. And we want to pull this forward in the X direction so that we have something like this, where it's going like this. Like, you don't want it to be beyond this rim part, but you want it to be closer than it is over here. So something like that is going to be good. This is the basics of it. So we can just go File, Save. The other thing I did to create this logo, what I did was, in this case, the number of vertices in the center that we have, like we have 6 vertices, or we have 8 actually. We have 8 vertices for that circle, and it really wasn't enough to get that detail that we wanted. It really looked pretty bad for the logo. So what I did to kind of fake it was I put another circle over it and used proportional editing to bring the center of that circle out as it would be, and then I unwrapped it and put the logo where this is, and we'll do that right now just to show you how I did that. So what I did was, in edit mode, just go to create circle, make this 32 vertices this time, press enter, RY 90, and we're going to scale it down with S. I'm in side view by pressing 3 on the number pad, by the way. And we want to make it so you get this vertex here. You want this vertex to be basically on that vertex. So just scale it until it's the same, like that. And what we're going to do is Mesh, Faces, Grid Fill. So we get this. Now we're going to do Shift H to hide everything except for our selection. Select the very middle point, so you have like these 2 lines going through here and they connect right here. This is the very middle point. And now you can either press O to enable proportional editing, or you can go down here and click enable. But actually, one thing we want to do is we don't want to move the outer vertices. So a good way to do that is to just hide them. Anything that's hidden will not be affected by proportional editing. So if we do Alt right click and then Alt Shift right click until we get all of this, and then press H to hide, those will no longer be affected by proportional editing. And now we can select the center vertex again and just drag this out some, but you'll see it's moving the whole thing. That's because the proportional editing is affecting too large of an area. So if we just click and drag, and then while we're clicking and dragging, middle mouse up until you get this circle coming into view, and you can see now how it's changing the way that the proportional editing is being affected. So what we want in this case is we want these very outer vertices to be affected very slightly, but we also want the rest of it to be affected. So you want to make this circle big enough to where you start noticing the outer vertices moving slightly, but not too much. And then you can move it, you can move the center point to wherever you want it. So that might be a little bit much. That might be a little better. So you can just press Tab now, go to Tools, and enable Smooth Shading again. I'm actually just going to do Alt-H to get everything back. And for whatever reason, it's not smoothing out this object like it should be. So we can go to Shading and do Smooth. And there we go. This one kind of blends in better for whatever reason. Maybe it's because there's a material on it. I'm not sure. But this is what we have now, so we're just going to save this. And to get that logo, we're going to have to unwrap it. So we're going to click and drag on this these little three triangles that were there. Just click and drag, opens up a new window. Go here, UV Image Editor, and we can close this tab by pressing N. So press the N key with your mouse over here. That'll close that. And what we want to do is unwrap this whole thing. So we're going to first select one of these vertices, do Select Linked, press U, and unwrap might be okay. I guess that's fine. That's going to work for us, I guess. And we're going to select one of these, do Select Linked, press U, and then unwrap. That's going to be fine as well. So we're just going to press S to scale this down, and G to move it out of the way for a minute. So we want to use one of the pictures we've already loaded in. So we're going to click on this and click on the Tesla Model, whoops, click on this other one. The Model 3 wheel is the one that we want. So we want this logo right here. And to get that, we're just going to press G. Oh wow, actually proportional editing was on when I moved that, so it looks like it messed it up. So I'm going to do Ctrl Z, and that doesn't look like it did anything. So I'm just going to load this up again. Maybe it's when I loaded it up, it looked like it distorted this for some reason. So I'm going to turn proportional editing off anyway, do disabled, and just press G, and this looks really non-circular for whatever reason. So we're just going to kind of position it here, then do S and then Y to, we'll just straighten it out manually. So I just did S and Y with all of this selected to scale it on the y-axis, and then just scale it until it meets up with this outer area here. So like that. And use G to move this, by the way. Just use G to grab it and move it. So that lines up with that. Now what we want to do is go from Blender Render to Cycles Render, because that's a better rendering engine. And we're going to add some quick materials. So we're going to make sure you're in object mode, and then right click on the rim, and we'll go over here. So middle mouse click and drag, go to the materials panel, click on new, go here, change it to the node editor, press N to close this panel, zoom in with the mouse wheel, and you can change the area of this so we can see it better. So for a rim we want a diffuse and a glossy, so we have a diffuse already. Let's go to add, and shader, glossy, BSDF, place it here, then do add shader, mix shader, because we're going to mix these in together. Then just put it here and left click, and it will automatically connect the diffuse to the top part, and then left click here and connect it to the bottom part. This factor here, it's at 0.5, which means it's basically going to have half diffuse and half glossy. You can adjust this up or down, or you can just left click and enter in a value, and that will change the value. I think 0.5 is okay. I don't remember what I did over here. 0.5. I really didn't do anything special. The other thing I did was change this color to a pure white because I just thought it looked better. So just click on the color and drag this all the way up till it's a pure white. So there's that material. Now what we want to do is make the material for this part, which is a little more tricky. Just gonna left click here. I just made this a pure diffuse, but I used that image texture. So we're gonna do add texture, image texture, and then bring it over here by using G to move it. And we want to click here and choose that image texture. It was the Model 3 wheel one. And we want to go to File, User Preferences, and this time we want to do Node. Type in Node because we want the Node Wrangler, and then just enable it, and then close this. Then do Ctrl T with this selected, and your mouse over here, do Ctrl T. It's going to add in a mapping and texture coordinate node. This just means it's going to use the UVs because we unwrapped this part. We want it to use the UVs. This would allow us to adjust the scale and stuff, but we're not going to do that. And now we want to left click here and bring the color over to the color so that the diffuse color is now affected by the texture. And that's really all we have to do here. I'm just going to move these a little closer so that it's a little easier to read it. And we can go back to the UV image editor. So we lined up this part here to make sure that the UVs of this match the UVs of this. The outer part needs to just be black in this case. So if we press tab, press A twice, and then what we want to do is deselect this circle. So we can actually probably just hide it. So we can select this, do select linked, press H to hide, and then press A to get this, and then scale it down So really all we want for these UVs is we just want these UVs to be in one of these black areas. So you can scale it down, move it around, press R to rotate if you want. And you really just want this to be in one of these black areas for the UVs so that this whole thing will be black. It's really that simple. So everything should be set up. We can press Alt H in edit mode to unhide this if you want. And now we can set up a little quick lighting setup. So I'm going to go to a new layer. Shift S, cursor to center, just to make sure it's in the center. Do create plane. Tab into edit mode, bring this up. We're going to do R, Y, and 30 degrees maybe. Press enter, bring this back. Then we're going to change this to the 3D cursor. We're going to do RZ30. And then do Shift D, right click to cancel, RZ -60. This is going to be our lighting setup here. So we're going to, in the materials tab, press new, change this from diffuse to emission. This will now make the planes have an emission shader. So we can click on the first layer, shift click on the second layer so that they're both active. And now we can change this to rendered view. And we can take a quick look at our result. So you can see this is a little dark perhaps compared to this, like this is a lighter color. And there's a couple things you could do. The easiest thing to do is go over here with your emission shader and just increase the strength to 2 maybe. And it will make that lighter. You could go higher if you want, 3. Make it even more white like it is over here. But that is basically it. So you have a pretty good looking rim. Everything looks okay. You've got the center logo here. If you want the logo to be rotated differently, like it looks like it's fairly accurate actually, because the top part of the T is facing basically here and it's facing basically here. But if you wanted to, what you could do to change that, let's just go to material mode, or you can do texture, it doesn't really make a difference. And then select the centerpiece, press tab, select this, go to select linked to get our circle. So if you want to change the rotation of this T, you just go over here and you'd press R and you can change the rotation of the T. So really wherever you think it should be. Like I'm probably just going to leave it because it looks fine. But let's say it didn't look fine, that's how you would change the direction of it. But I am actually happy with the way that it turned out, just naturally, so I just right click to cancel the rotation. And that's going to be it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something and enjoyed it. Have fun with your new low poly model. This actually turned out lower vertex count than my other one. This is 700 versus 800. So that is it for this tutorial. Feel free to download either version. They'll both be available. Links in the description. And I'll see you later. One minor issue that I actually noticed with this model is that these top parts here, like there's actually some space here, and you may not want that. Like you see the space from this angle and it's not really visually attractive. There's not supposed to be a space there, so to fix that we can just press tab, and what you want to do, I'm just going to press period to focus in on this vertex. What you want to do is select the vertices that are not going through this other mesh. So these three in this case. And we want to change from 3D cursor pivot point to median point. And then you just want to bring these up until they go through the mesh. And it kind of makes this isn't the best maybe. So you can select this one vertex and move it around until you have a better, a better shape to this part right here. Whatever you think looks good, really. And you can also possibly move it down some too if you wanted, but it's up to you, like what you do. So like that looks okay. But yeah, just play around with that until you get it the way you want it. And then you can do the same over here. So just select the vertices that are giving you a problem. So these 4, and you can bring them up. Or you can bring them, if these planes are getting in your way, just press tab and then select only the first layer. And then just do the same here. Bring these in until they go through. And that problem's solved. But you'll notice it only fixed it on this one rim area. These others still have that problem. So we're going to have to delete the others. So we're going to select one vertex on each of these spokes. Or you can select 2, it's fine. Just make sure you get at least one. Then do select linked. Press delete. Choose vertices. Select one here. Do select linked. Press 3 to go to side view. It's important that you're in side view so the rotation happens correctly. Go to this part, do 3D cursor, do Shift S, cursor to center, just to make sure it's in the center, and then do Shift D, R, 72, press enter, and then do Shift R, and then Shift R, and we're back to where we were, except those problems are now fixed on all of the spokes. And another thing I forgot to mention is don't forget to save, so go to File and Save. If you want to render, just make sure you do shift and click on this other layer so that your lights are going to be enabled and you actually get the render that you're looking for. So now you can go ahead and do file and save.